I cannot overstate what I'm about to say enough, because today is one of the most tragic days in football that we've had in our lifetime. Not necessarily just because one big club that we saw in Champions League not all that long ago is on the brink of extinction, but because we're seeing the first effects, not just the first, not even the first, but some of the biggest effects of the over-commercialization that this sport has seen over the last few decades, and especially the last few years. Now, we've seen it in MLS, a closed system league that protects the money of the billionaire owners, and it doesn't promote growth. It doesn't promote the youth or the academies and the players that they charge thousands of dollars to play every single season, and that's not an exaggeration. But we don't see that as much in Europe because it's a system that promotes growth, and it promotes teams to want to see success because they'll see success and they'll also see the financial gain that comes from it. Now, Bundesliga is the most protected in this aspect because there are rules in place to directly combat over-commercialization. We see it with there being a rule against putting any company or sponsor's name in your actual Bundesliga name, like RB Leipzig. RB Leipzig are the scum of the earth. They are the worst club on the face of the planet. They are the absolute worst thing that has happened to the sport ever. Hate them with a passion because they find loopholes in order for Red Bull, the company that owns them, to push and push and push and push and push their logo forward and their name forward. Now, RB Leipzig, to any non-Bundesliga fan and to anybody looking in from the outside, you would think it stands for Red Bull Leipzig, but it doesn't because you're not allowed to name it Red Bull Leipzig. Instead, it's called Rasenball Sport Leipzig, which doesn't make any sense because if you take the direct translation from German to English, it basically means grass ball sport Leipzig, which doesn't make any sense. No sense at all. Nobody else calls themselves grass ball sport. But the importance of that name is the fact that it abbreviates to RB Leipzig, so that you will think that it means Red Bull Leipzig, on top of the fact that there's another rule, a very much more important rule, called the 50+1 rule. The 50+1 rule not only protects every club, it protects the entire integrity of Bundesliga, because it means that every single club in Bundesliga needs to be owned 50% plus one person by the fans. So 50% of the votes, 50% of the ownership is fan-owned plus one person, which means the majority is owned by the fans. It protects them from any big ownership trying to buy out the club and putting them in through to a disaster, like we've seen with FC Bordeaux, which we'll talk about here in a second. But RB Leipzig, of course, found a loophole to that one as well, because instead of the thousands and tens of thousands of members that you see from other clubs in the league, like Dortmund and Bayern, they have 17. They have 17 members. And the reason they only have 17 members is because, one, they don't have any fans. And the fans they do have are just scum just like them. But it's because they make the process to becoming a member of the club impossible and ridiculously expensive. So they only have 17 members, all 17 of which work for Red Bull, which means 100% of the team is Red Bull owned. They are just an energy drink pretending to be a football club. And so I get off on a bit of a tangent there to show you guys how dangerous it can be when a football club is completely owned by a company that doesn't necessarily even care about the football. And that's exactly what happened to FC Bordeaux in November of 2018 when an American company came in and bought the club, FC Girondins de Bordeaux, which I'm sure I just butchered that name. Let me know down in the comments. I'm sure French people will let me know and call me very mean names. But either way, Bordeaux was bought by King Street, which is an American company that took over, and they took over a club that was finishing top 6 in the last 3 of the 4 years that they were in Ligue 1. Top 6 is not a bad finish. A club that just won Coupe de France 5 years before they bought them. A club that just won the double in France 10 years before they bought them. And a club that was competing in Champions League pretty consistently throughout the 2000s. And then after the ownership bought them, they injected not too much money into the club, but they did take a lot of those ticket sales, a lot of those jersey sales, a lot of those sales that they got for players like Malcolm to Barcelona. And then when things went south, when coronavirus hit, and they didn't get any of the money from the ticket sales, a lot of clubs saw a big struggle during this time. We even talked about how FC Barcelona went $1.2 billion in debt. We saw other clubs absolutely struggle during this time, but none more than Bordeaux, because instead of sticking with the club, King Street decided to abandon them completely. And here's exactly what the French media had to say about it. King Street clowns Bordeaux left on the brinks of collapse by American owners. An absolute disaster. Now, when talking about American clubs buying European clubs, what they say is that there's been no effort to understand the history or culture of the game. The importance of the fans have increasingly diminished. None of these clubs, however, have suffered like Bordeaux, whose demise is the worst case scenario under American ownership. Dugry says, I'm disgusted, sad, and relieved at the same time. It's a good thing that these clowns are leaving. Now, King Street left them in an absolute hole, because a team that was finishing 6th seemingly every season was now finishing in 12th and 14th, and then they left them without any money, and it only got worse from there. Because even though a new owner came in and decided, I'm going to try to save this club, because that's always how it will go. Somebody's got to do it. It was too late. And they got relegated to the second division after finishing dead last in Ligue 1. Now, you finish last in a league, it's not the end of the world. We saw Schalke do it, and even though they're still in the second Bundesliga, they're still doing fine, because the Bundesliga and the protection that the fans have, and honestly, even as a Dortmund fan, I can admit the fan base that they have. It helps. It helps a lot. When you're a big club, it does help when you go down, because it becomes a little bit easier to get back up. But for Bordeaux, they struggled again. Instead of finishing top 4 or anything like that, or getting back up into Ligue 1, they finished below mid-table again. And things are looking very, very bad for them, because now they're getting audited by the league, and the league says, hey guys, we don't think you can afford to play next year. I don't think that your finances are in check. And Bordeaux said, no, we are fine. Because FGS, the same company that bought Liverpool, the same company that owns the Boston Red Sox, the same American company, is going to buy us. And they're going to have a huge cash injection for us, and we're going to be just fine. Not only are we going to be fine, but they're going to help us get back into Ligue 1 and return to the place that we belong, which is the Champions League, or at least pushing for an upper mid-table of Ligue 1. That's where we're going to be. And then FGS looked at the situation, and they're like, oh my God, this is so much worse than we thought. We are out of here. And then Bordeaux was like, all right, well, maybe you guys are right. We're going to withdraw that appeal. You guys are 100% correct. We can't afford the next season. We're screwed right now. So they got relegated. Even though they weren't in relegation in the league, they finished bottom mid-table, but they did not finish in relegation. They got pushed down to the third division. But even then, for a club as big as Bordeaux, it's not the end of the world until today. Bordeaux have announced that they are no longer going to be listed as a professional club at all. They are going bankrupt. They are offloading every single professional player that they have on their roster. They are now free agents. Bordeaux have now shut down their facility. Not their entire facility, but the training facility is shut down. They cannot afford it. And now they're going into the third division with no players. And honestly, not a lot of hope. Because even a club that has the communal support of one of the biggest clubs in France is now undergoing this. And we should have seen the signs. Because years ago, we saw Real Madrid and Barcelona push real hard for something called the Super League, in which all of the biggest clubs would take all the money, just like the closed system that the MLS has, and funnel all of it to the top and protect the owners and protect the money, screwing everybody else over underneath them. and we see the over-commercialization and the new owners and the oil money that gets injected into these big clubs year after year, we see it picked apart. It's only a matter of time. Bordeaux is just the first. It's going to happen to more and more and more clubs as time goes on, because when 100% of your ownership comes in from a company that is just looking at the profits, and when the profits start to not look all that great and they just decide to leave, well, you're screwed. You don't have 51% of your club owned by fans to protect it. It's just not possible. And so Bordeaux is now in the third division, and they're not looking all too great. The future of Bordeaux is in jeopardy. And I hope to God that they are able to climb back up, because it's a club with so much rich history of well over a century. And because of a bit of greed for a couple of years, over a century of work is diminished to nothing. And they have to build all the way back up almost from nothing again. And that's the sad truth that commercialization is going to bring to this sport if the fans do not continue to speak up like we did with the Super League. But unfortunately, we're even seeing it with UEFA. UEFA have come forward and said the Champions League is now going to have more teams and more games, and that's going to bring more money to our pocket. And FIFA says the World Cup is going to have more teams and more games, which is going to bring more money to our pocket. And we're going to have more competitions in the summer. We're going to have more international friendly matches during the summer and the preseason to sell out more stadiums. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse every season. So Bordeaux is just the first, unfortunately, of many. And the only people that can really stop it is the fans and their support. But I don't see it happening anytime soon. Make sure to subscribe to Nitro Charged. Link to my main is down in the description. And drop a like if you enjoyed.